Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. It is January the 2nd, 2014. This is our first show for the new year, so Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Graham Perro here in chilly southern Ontario, where it is currently about minus 30 outside. With me today, as always, are Melissa Daphne in the relatively warm Denver, Colorado, and Tyler Fitch in positively tropical Vancouver, Washington. Guess we'll get right into it. We didn't have any news this week in terms of rule changes or trades or crazy things like that. So game one of the season, I guess, was Philly taking on the Buffalo Bandits. And the three of us all chose Buffalo to win this one. Of the whole IL Indoor group that chooses their games, all but one chose Buffalo to win this. And guess what? Buffalo did not win this. Considering they were last in the league last year and pretty close to last in the league the year before, the fact that they lost really shouldn't be that big of a surprise, but it did seem to be one. I thought that with the new coach and with the addition of Ryan Benesh and Andrew Watt and a few other changes that they made, they were looking maybe not championship worthy, but certainly better than last in the league. And they didn't look a heck of a lot much better on Saturday night than they did last year. Tyler, did you happen to watch the game?
Yeah, it was on my second screen there, so I didn't pay as close attention as I could have, being at the same time as the Rochester game. But I just saw Philly just light them up. Jordan Hall, 4 goals in about 5 minutes. Incredible start to that game for Philadelphia. They had the first goal early on and basically seized momentum and never let go. Buffalo battled back some, but they really were never in it, and I was surprised. With Cordingley and the roster changes, I expected a lot bigger, plus playing at home, I expected a lot bigger fight out of them. How about you, Melissa? Did you get to see any, or were you traveling to your game?
I was definitely at the Mammoth game when this was on, and I did not get to watch the replay.
All right. Yeah, it was incredible to see Philly come out with a roster of comparatively, like, not really unknown guys, but guys who are just kind of mix and match, stick them together. You have Tracy Koleski, who had, I think Graham, you said this, he had 10 points last year.
10 points last year in 10 games or 12 games or something. He didn't play the whole season, but yeah, 10 points in the whole season and then 6 points on Saturday against his former team.
Yeah, he looked fine. He looked like he knew his role in the Philly offense and just did work. A little guy named Kyle Buchanan, he spent last season with the stealth in and out of the active roster, game day roster. And he's kind of a little spark plug, go in the corner and battle for balls, but he had 3 goals, and it looked kind of like a little Jeff Sawicki out there. He's got a lot of potential to just kind of be a pest and get shots, get goals, and just out-hustle you. It's nice to see that effort from him.
You mentioned something before we started recording that Jordan Hall was not on the list of on IL Indoors list of top 50 players in the NLL, and my first thought was, well, don't be stupid. Of course he is. So I went to the list, and sure enough, he's not there. Now, I mean, the people on the list are pretty impressive. I think somebody like Lewis Ratcliffe was about 45th or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's some pretty darn good players on there, but I am kind of surprised that Hall didn't make the top 50. He's had a good game on Saturday.
He had a great game. He's had some injuries with blowing out his knee, so he kind of falls off the radar a little bit. And last year he didn't have a banner year with big production. But he's been on Team Canada in the 2006 World Field Championships that were in London, Ontario, I think. He was the only college kid to play for Team Canada's team. Everybody else was like out of college and playing at a higher level. So he's already been at the highest level since he was young. And 2011, he was on the Canadian indoor team in Prague. And I would see him making the team again just because he's a left-handed transition player. He's he's elite, and to not be in the top 50 and realize that next year, well, yeah, now it's next year's 2015. He'll be on the Canadian indoor team again, probably. He's a top 50 player, and they totally dropped the ball on that one.
Yeah, every time I've seen him play, he's definitely one of those players that stands out in your mind. And it looks like he had just an awesome game. I'm sure the Bandits taking their penalties didn't exactly help them. I mean, 3 of them in 22 seconds. That's an undisciplined team.
That's bandit ball.
It is, and when the Mammoth played them for the Cup, it was as soon as they started getting behind, you just saw them fall apart because they just started becoming so undisciplined, and it's like you just have to take that out of them, and they fall apart.
It's weird how that's been part of the Buffalo game for so long that people have been talking about that on message boards and on Twitter and stuff for years and years, that get the Bandits to start taking stupid penalties and they almost can't stop themselves. And rather than having to worry about how you're going to beat them, you just have to make them beat themselves. And if they're in the penalty box for most of the second half of the game, you're on the power play for 2/3 of it, then you're in good shape.
It really is funny. I was just talking the other day about that, those kinds of things, how even though the whole dynamic of the team has changed several times over, it's not the same team, you still have those really long-standing rivalries, even though half the team is now on the other team, you just have those rivalries that just continue and continue. It's kind of crazy.
That was always an odd thing, I thought, about the Toronto-Calgary. I never really thought of it as a rivalry. I think I was told that the Calgary people thought of it as a rivalry. They obviously have one with the Edmonton Rush, but they thought of one with Toronto as well. But Toronto-Calgary games always seemed to get really chippy, and there was fights, and there was pushing and shoving and all kinds of stuff. And Toronto's never been one of those teams that gets into that kind of game all the time anyway. But whenever Calgary's in town, that's what happens. And Calgary's in town tomorrow night, so I'm kind of looking forward to that.
And the other thing to note in the game was the stats had Philly taken 70 shots against the Buffalo defense, which is outrageous. I think usually if a team's taken 55 shots, it's a lot. And to go another 15 on top of that, initially, before I saw the stats, it's like Cosmo's toast. Whatever he's doing isn't working. You can't keep playing him in this way. And then it's like, oh, Cosmo and Curtis Wager, they face 70 shots. It's not all their fault. In those situations, you got to pin it on the D, and I'm amazed that you can even take 70 shots practically.
Well, if they spent a lot of time on the power play, that definitely would have had an impact on that. If they're getting more loose balls, just more shots near the goal.
Yeah, but in a perfect game, like alternating every 30-second shot clock, you get 60 shots in a game. And then they had 10 more than that. That's a lot of shots.
Yeah, people were talking about Cosmo as being a big problem, and here we go again, and Cosmo was the cause of that game and all that kind of thing. But like you said, if you're facing 70 shots, and you're stopping 75% of them, you're still going to let in a lot of goals. And the Bandits' save percentage in that game was exactly 75%, and the Wings' save percentage was exactly 75%. The Wings just obviously took a lot more shots, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you have to look at how many of those shots were right at the crease, too. A goalie can only face so many of those shots before just the law of averages, one of them is going to go in. And if you get 5 shots in the crease, at the crease within 15 seconds or so, just because they keep bouncing, they recover right back another shot, those are going to take their toll.
I think Troy Cordingley said that in his post-game interview, that, was Cosmo outstanding? No. Was he, did he do an adequate job? Yeah, he did. But if you're going to face that many shots, you can't blame that on the goalie. You gotta blame that on the defense. They shouldn't be letting that many shots in.
Yeah, 70 shots is ridiculous. That's more power to the Philadelphia Wings offense, but there was definitely issues with the Bandits' defense if that many were allowed. Obviously not allowed, but you know.
And one thing I heard before the game was that Dane Smith was going to be coming out the back end and Mark Stainhouse was going to be coming out the front. So it seemed kind of odd. Not that Stainhouse, can't do it. He's certainly proven that he can be an effective offensive player. But he's been more of a transition defense guy for the last couple of years anyway. Whereas Dane Smith was, as far as I know, purely an offensive guy last year. So why they swapped him around, I'm not entirely sure. But looking at the stat sheet, they both had 5 points. Smith had 3 goals, but Smith had 13 shots on goal. Stainhouse only had 4. So if Smith was actually coming out the back end and ended up with 13 shots, I don't know what's going on there. That seems kind of backwards to me. So I'm guessing that Smith was actually playing offense that night.
Yeah, I didn't watch close enough to know that for sure. Speaking of Stainhouse, my wife looks over. They yell out Stainhouse's name, not yell, say his name on the play-by-play, and she just looks at the screen and says, "What?" I just said charity tour, and she goes, "Oh, okay." That conversation between the two of us completely covered his lack of hair now. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, but he did some sort of charity thing where he cut off his long curly locks that he's had for the last at least 6-7 years.
I don't think I noticed.
I don't think I noticed the hair, other than they did show him on the floor at one point, and I noticed that there wasn't hair sticking out underneath his helmet.
Yeah.
And so I just assumed that he tied it back a little differently or something. I didn't realize he cut it off.
Yeah, he did some sort of event to cut it off.
Oh, well, good for him. What else was going on in the East? We had the Swarm at the Nighthawks. I didn't watch much of this game. I watched a little of it, but the video feed was pretty crappy, so I ended up switching over to the Buffalo game, which had a much better feed. But props to Joel McCready for this one. He was a defensive transition guy last year, and I don't know if he was actually playing the offense this year or in this game, or if he was still on transition. But he ended up with a couple of goals and 3 assists, and had a pretty nice game.
Pretty
Did
important.
you guys watch this one as well?
Yeah, pretty important goals there at the end to take the lead and then seal it. He usually plays forward in the summer with Langley Thunder, so he's comfortable up on that half of the floor. But the game was, first quarter was maybe 1 or 2 goals, and it was all Matt Vince shutting people down. You could tell that the Minnesota guys were trying to take shots to get by Vince, while on the other side, Tyler Carlson was in net for the Swarm. Rochester was just taking their shots, and then some were going in. Most of them weren't early on. It was very low scoring, great goalie play. But I felt Minnesota was pressured to beat Vince, and they couldn't. And they only got 6 goals, and it was very difficult for them on offense that night, compared to Rochester, who just did their usual thing and battled. And they know even if they score 8 that they can win a game with Vince. And they've not the first time they scored 8, or even maybe 7-1. They played a game against the Stealth a year ago. They only scored 7 or 8, and they won. So 8 goals is enough for Rochester, and they know it. But Vince had Minnesota frustrated and trying all sorts of things to get their shots to go, as opposed to just grip it and rip it usually.
That's kind of some crazy stats. I mean, for Rochester to win with 45 saves with Vince, and Carlson only had 26 saves, and I mean, 6 goals is nothing to sneeze at, but to only face, 34 shots, that's a
half of what
crazy.
Philly took.
Yeah.
Another odd thing is Rochester didn't score at all in the third quarter. They went between their, where does it go here? Between their 4th and 5th goal, they went 24 minutes without scoring. That's pretty unusual for a winning team.
Minnesota's got to be kicking themselves. We held them scoreless for half the game and couldn't win. But they're young. as every year they start out young and they'll learn these things when they got the rookies in this experience now. 18 games from now might be a different story.
Nice to see Andrew Suter back in the Swarm lineup after missing. I guess he missed about 8 games last year, probably close to half the season. But he was. I mean, as soon as he went down last year, it was obvious by everybody associated with the team talking about how he was the captain, he was the leader, he was the heart and soul of the team. So they were really going to miss him. So it was nice to see him back on the floor.
And I think as the Stealth proved, when you have not just a key player that really just gets the team motivated and keeps them going, and those kinds of leadership qualities, you really do notice that when they're gone. I mean, I'm sure Tyler can talk about with Zwicky out how the Stealth kind of crumbled for so long. And sometimes it's not even the captain that is that player.
Yeah, when you have the heart and soul of your team, people can step up, but there's a void for just a clutch play some way, somehow that can't be met.
We did find that in Toronto last year as well. Was it last year or the year before? When Colin Doyle was out for a period of time. I mean, there were certainly other players that stepped up offensively and put the ball in the net when it was necessary, but there was something on the offense that was just missing with Doyle out. And it was actually odd because he did come back for a couple of games and then got injured again. And for those couple of games, I'm pretty sure they lost both of them. But there was certainly no question that it wasn't a question of Doyle's back and we lost, so maybe we should get rid of him again. I think it was partially the offense was starting to kind of get used to not having him there, and then when he came back again, they had to readjust and didn't really readjust very well. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. The other game from last weekend, and Melissa, we'll turn to you for this one, Colorado and Edmonton.
That was a frustrating game. You go in, so excited. They made all these changes. They look good. First quarter, they come out and they looked awesome. I mean, the Rush didn't look slouchy or anything, but they definitely looked a little rougher. And then second quarter starts, and you're going, wait, is this the same team that we just watched 2 minutes ago? Because they're dropping passes, they're not even looking at passes coming at them. They just completely fell apart. And I am not impressed with the Dan Ball acquisition whatsoever, if that game was any indication. He just missed assignments that resulted in goals all over the place. He couldn't seem to catch a pass. Not impressed with that one. They definitely tried to make a comeback in the fourth, but for most of the game, it was like you were watching last year's team.
One of the interesting stats that I saw about that game was I watched parts of the first half, but I wasn't completely paying attention to it, and I started really watching the third, and it looked like John Grant just said at some point, you know what, we should win this, and he went out and did one of these John Grant things where he scored 3 goals in 10 minutes or something and assisted on another. But what I didn't realize was his first goal was at 12:35 of the third quarter. That was his first point in the game. He had 0 up until then. So it's almost like he decided just to turn it on and let's win this game. And if he'd done that a half an hour before, or say maybe, I don't know, first quarter, then it would have been quite a different game. Yeah,
there's some discussion with the fans that we're kind of wondering if we're going to have some issues with him and Drew Westerveld, because it did seem like you just didn't notice his presence, which maybe he was pulling back to give some of the other guys a chance to kind of step up, but that seemed very unlike the kind of play we've seen previously. So I am kind of worried about the whole I must save the team mentality. We've seen it from him before, and unfortunately when you have games where he is the one that saves the game and wins it, you can't kind of argue with that mentality. But just like when we had Gary Gait, there were too many times that the team relied on that one player to make that big clutch play when 4 other players could have easily done it. You know, it gets to be a slippery slope.
You see that a lot with, or you don't see it that a lot is what I meant to say, with people like the Nighthawks. There are certainly games when Cody Jamieson steps up and does what he does normally. Now there's other games where he's not as much of a factor, but then Johnny Powless will come up and be huge. Or if he can't do it, then Micah Kersey will come up and be huge, or somebody else. There's always seems to be somebody who steps up. But if you've got that one player who is a Grant or a Gate or a Tavares or somebody like that, and he can't step up, and nobody else does, you got a big problem.
Yeah, what I watched in the second half when Grant started getting his points, he was taking the ball to the cage and making his own moves and shooting from in close and bearing it. It was definitely had the eye like it's the go time. But I wonder if he has the energy and stamina to do that in the first half and the second half because he's older. It's going a guy who's 38, 39 drive to the cage in the first half and then still be successfully driving to the cage, especially against the rush defense in the second half. That's a tough proposition.
And you're also dealing with the altitude. I mean, even the top athletes will tell you that'll wear you down after a certain amount of time. It's no joke. And even if he's living here, if he's living lower, you know, even just coming up to Denver altitude could be enough that puts him off his game just enough. Adam Jones looked well, though. And Curtis Knight did for the rush as well, so.
Yeah, it was odd to see Mark Matthews kept off the score sheet. I believe he got a couple of assists, did he not? Yeah, he had 3 assists. But he certainly didn't have the impact that he had in his first couple of games last year. And I was kind of looking forward to seeing Robert Church playing his first game, but he was out with the flu, so he's down 1 game. What else are we seeing here? I'm just looking over the stat sheets. It looks like
Zach Greer and Corey Conway had pretty decent nights as well. And, I mean, they did force a goalie change, so there's something to be said with that. I mean, Sean Pollock and John Gallant were healthy scratches. You know, that may not have made a difference. Maybe that made all the difference.
Dylan Ward looked pretty darn good in his debut, though. He only played 18 minutes, so a little over a quarter. But I'm pretty sure he kept them scoreless for at least 12 or 13 minutes of that.
Yeah,
he looked comfortable.
Did look good.
Yeah, he was not like in the headlights rookie first game. He was just like, I'm just going to play goalie, and I looked pretty comfy.
Yeah, he actually kept the Mammoth with that potential of a comeback because he did. He kept them scoreless. I was impressed. It was like you merged Gene Nash and Eric Miller, and it was like, boom, wow, we have an awesome goalie. This kid's awesome. Since I didn't know much about him outside of just hearing about him, I really didn't know what to expect. But, I mean, the kid's 6'5", and he was just stopping everything left to right and right. I was impressed. I'll admit.
Now, I've seen him play on the Hamilton Nationals. That's obviously field lacrosse, so the goalie position at field is quite a bit different from the goalie position in box. And I'm honestly not sure how much box experience he has, but like you said, Tyler, he did look pretty comfortable in there. Another rookie from the Rush, Riley Lowen, had a couple of goals. So maybe even without Robert Church, they had some good showing from at least one rookie on their roster.
Yeah, most definitely. If any rookie production you get in their very first game is usually a little bit of a bonus, unless it's a guy like Mark Matthews with the expectations are set. But yeah, Lowen came in and produced some unexpected points, and 2 goals and a 3-goal win. It gave him a cushion.
Yeah, the Rush looked good. I mean, they started out a little rough, but you could tell when they found their groove, because it was like complete opposite of the Mammoth. Like, they started falling apart, and it was like they just were like, okay, we're hitting high gear, and they weren't bobbling passes. They looked good. Speaking of passes, I was impressed with Dylan Ward's outlet pass. We haven't had somebody that could do that since G Nash. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come if he plays more. I know the last couple goalies we had didn't seem to be very good with their passes.
I think that's something I got kind of used to with Bob Watson and kind of took it for granted. And then when Matt Roy came in to backstop the Rock, he was able to do a couple of things in net that Watson could never do because he was so huge. I mean, I think he's 6'5" as well. But I didn't find his outlet passes were nearly as good or as accurate as Watson. Nick Rose seems to be pretty good at it. But that was something that Watson definitely excelled at.
Yeah, that was something we really, like you said, kind of took for granted when we had G Nash, because that really helped our transition game, and we had some great transition guys at the time. So when you had that goalie that could get it all the way down and really give them that head start, it has a huge impact. I mean, we've had a couple goalies that as soon as you saw them winding up for that pass, you're like, oh, there goes the other team getting the ball. Because every time it was intercepted, like, you just had that sense of dread when it's like, oh, we're going to shoot this all the way down. Oh, nope, it's coming back. But Belante was actually looking pretty good. So it really was kind of, the defense was falling apart a little bit. Like I said, Ball was really missing some crucial coverage, like just missing his assignments, and he dropped some passes that he really should not have dropped. I don't know why he missed it. It was like he just took his eyes off the ball. And so Belonge actually did look pretty good.
Okay, I guess that's it for the games this week. Only 3. Next week will be even shorter because there's only 2. Tomorrow we have Calgary visiting Toronto, and then on Saturday, I'm pretty sure it's Saturday night, we have Vancouver in Colorado again. Not again, meaning Colorado has another home game. We did do some predictions last week, and let's see how we did. Melissa was 0-3, I was 1-2, and Tyler was 2-1, being the grand champion of the week. So, Tyler, since you did so well last week, you can go first this week. Calgary and Toronto, and Vancouver and Colorado.
What exactly did I win?
You won the right to go first this week.
Oh, hey, that makes sense. All right. Just looking at the teams straight up, I see Calgary beating Toronto. In my heart, I want Toronto to win, as beating a West team is good for the stealth, but the Calgary roster is top notch. They can go on the road and get a win in Vancouver, in Toronto, in my mind. And then the Vancouver Mammoth game. It's tricky with the Mammoth having played a game. They'll have the jitters out of the way, and they're still at home, so they'll be comfortable there. But the Stealth haven't really lost a game, maybe one game in Colorado in the last 5 years or something like that. So they're not too worried about it. And I'd like to see Vancouver win that game as well. So I have Calgary and Vancouver.
Okay. I guess I had the second best record, so I'll go second. And I'm trying to decide whether picking Toronto is a homer pick or is a pick that because I think Toronto can actually win it. And I think they can win it. I'm going to go with the Rock on this one. Though I think of almost any team coming into Toronto, Calgary worries me more than most. I'm pretty sure Toronto has a winning record against Calgary in Toronto all time, but It's just that when you look at that offense, even with a Ranger, but you look at Sean Evans and Dane Doby and Daryl Veltman and Jeff Shattler, and just the whole gang. The offense kind of scares me, but I'm still going to go with the Rock. And Vancouver, Colorado. I agree that with Colorado having one game under their belt, they'll hopefully be playing a little more as a team and have their stuff together that way. But I think I still have to go with the stealth with Tyler Richards in net, and they have a pretty impressive offense as well. So I'm going to go with Vancouver. Melissa, how about you?
I am going to actually go with the home team with the Toronto-Calgary game. I'm with you. I think that one's probably going to come down to just a couple goals. They're both tough teams. I mean, no matter how you look at it, they're tough. And even with the traveling, it seems like, as much as I hate to admit it, there are definitely seasons where the East beats the West more often. Some seasons it's the opposite. But between certain teams, I'm just probably going to favor the East, and so we're going to go with Toronto. And with Vancouver, Colorado, it's always a close game. They almost always go into overtime, so it's definitely one of those ones that could go either way, but I'm going to go with Vancouver. Colorado has an issue with not playing 4 quarters, and even if they have one under their belt, I just don't know if they have it in them. And Vancouver, the stealth team, they are a tough team.
Okay, so all three of us picked Vancouver, which, if we go by last week, means Colorado is looking pretty good.
Yeah, just pick opposite of me.
Okay. All right, that's all we had on our agenda. Any other topics you guys wanted to discuss before we sign off for the evening?
I'm curious what Tyler had about weird uniforms.
Oh yeah, it was the Philly. They're wearing their red jerseys, so they're dark tops, as it were, and they're wearing these white shorts with them that looked completely out of place. And it was the oddest thing. They had these red stripes on the side that kind of made them dark as well, but it didn't look quite right. Nothing like Rochester, which all matched up, or Minnesota was gold from like head to toe and it looked great. And then Philly just looked like completely mismatched and almost awful.
I had to say I noticed that as well. When I saw the white shorts with the red jerseys, I thought, why are they wearing their practice shorts? Why wouldn't they put the real uniform on?
That's interesting. I wonder if that is a one-time thing, or that there was an issue with the other shorts, or if that's actually what they're planning on doing this season and having the opposite.
It's not beyond the league for somebody to pack the wrong thing. That's what it comes down to. But we'll have to wait till they play another game to verify this.
All right, I guess that will do it for this show. If you want to get in touch with us, we have an email address set up, which is feedback@addictedtolacrosse.com. If you want to reach us on Twitter, that's probably the second easiest way anyway. My Twitter handle is Graham Perro, as you can see on the screen. Tyler is Stealth Dragon, and Melissa is Snow Kitten. We also have a new Twitter account specifically for the podcast, which is LAX Podcast. So you can tweet some feedback there if you'd like. I guess that's it for this show. We will try to get another show ready hopefully next Monday. Our plan is to do Mondays during the season if everybody is available, hopefully. And so we will see you next week.
Till next time.
See ya.